All right, I'm gonna go live on your thing.
Sorry, guys. I'm here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Can you have any volume out there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to go through the quick version of the script. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted in person and remotely for the public pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Let's see. We're using Zoom webinar for this meeting for all those to attend remotely. I will do my best to call on those remotely and in person for who I see kind of put their hand up first. No preference for those in person or remotely. And because we have everyone here, we will not have to take each vote by roll call. So that's really nice. Okay, I'll call to order the April 27th Select Board meeting to order. There's no changes to the agenda that I'm aware of. Libby, for announcements.
This meeting is being video and audio recorded, as you mentioned. Annual town meeting is coming up for 2022, this coming Monday, May 2nd at 5 p.m. at the high school. There will, in the auditorium, there will be an overflow in the gym. And I wanted to mention that the annual voter's guide to the warrant articles is now online. The warrant has been sent to all voters. Hopefully everybody has received it by now. We've got some videos out there for public outreach, and we've been meeting with some various community groups to review the warrant with them. Finance Committee has had a public informational session yesterday, and we're ready to go on Monday. The annual election is scheduled for Tuesday, May 10th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Nantucket High School. And we've got 2022 committee, board, and commission vacancies posted online, and there is a timeline associated with those, again, posted online. I think people could just go and look. Oh, thank you, Erica.
Would you rather have the timeline?
Sure. So we've got the timeline posted here. There are, the committees are broken into, are they into two? Or is it all one?
Nope, it's broken into two.
So there's a couple of different deadlines depending on what committee people might be applying for, and all again listed on the timeline, and appointments will be made by the board after the various announcements in accordance with the committee appointment policy on June 22nd.
Yep.
That is it for announcements.
Thank you, Libby. Any select board announcements or comments to start off with? No, I have a few. First off, this is Christy's last Wednesday night at select board meeting. So I wanted to thank Christy for her 3 years of service. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
You still have a town meeting and some other stuff going on. Let's see. I've had a lot of people reaching out on, and I've seen things in different media on the host community agreement policy that Bartlett Farms will be applying tonight for that. That is not how it's going to go. We're going to be talking about the policy for that, and then people can apply later, those institutions. So I just wanted to be clear, if you were here to be for or against Bartlett Farms, that's not tonight. But we will be talking about the host community agreement and the policy terms for cannabis cultivators. And I also wanted to throw this out to the board. If we can try to start using cannabis instead of marijuana, I think it's something we should strive for, as marijuana has derogatory connotations. So if it slips, it's not a big deal, but I think we should really start using cannabis.
How about pot?
You can use whatever you want. That's
Is
just my
pot, is
opinion.
pot derogatory? I'm just
No,
okay.
no. I mean, there's lots of slang. You
Yeah.
know.
Okay. Just asking.
And then what else? Oh, also in the shooting range tonight. That is just an update. Just want to make sure that if there's anybody here that wants to that thinks putting some clarity in some of these agenda items. So the shooting range facility is just an update that Libby will be giving during the town manager's report. And I think that's it. Any comments? Good from the board? Okay. There's no follow-up comments from prior select board meetings. Is there any public comment tonight that's not on the agenda? Let me look digitally here. Anybody have any opinions on anything that's not on the agenda tonight? Not on the agenda?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Come up to the mic.
Okay. Like you, I misinterpret what the newspaper said until I read the
Make sure you say your name.
selectmen's,
Say your name.
excuse me,
Say your name.
the selectmen's agenda.
Can you state your
And
name for the record?
My name, oh, excuse me.
Yeah, that's what she was
Robert
asking.
Cole. I forget. Nantucket resident, been involved. I would just like to inform the selectmen about the history of the issue that you're going to talk about later. I'm not against anybody. I'm not for anybody. But if we look back 4 years ago today, you, the board, a lot of the same members that are on it today, were making rules for the town meeting. You hired outside counsel. I believe you spent an awful lot of money on outside counsel for this one issue. I let it be known that I thought that that was too rushing into it. You didn't have plans. So what I did is the next year I went to town meeting and passed an article that said to make a committee with the rules being done the next year. COVID happened. It didn't get done in a year. As a matter of fact, I went to one of the meetings where you were there and listened and was very frustrated. And I let that be known in an email after that one meeting. The last meeting I saw from the advisory commission, I was flabbergasted that town council had said that you could have a cultivation license. From what I read and what I dealt with and was trying to help you all with such the issues as testing. And as you've seen, testing has become an unbelievably big issue between the two dispensaries. We're at the same spot we were 4 years ago. And if you're going to rush into a decision about cultivation license with not thinking this through, you'll be in the same boat as you are today. And if you think it's worked out well, then maybe I'm just talking through my hat. But there's an awful lot of issues that, the town meeting, when the first article passed 4 years ago, there was a lot of shenanigans with that. There was shenanigans of an article being put in to just go against one person. I was told that the people working with Green Lady told them to don't question anything at town meeting. I don't know if this is all true, but I know that it was shady. We went on from that, and we're exactly that point today. So I want you all to really think about this issue and try to move forward for Nantucket. I would be all for anybody that wants to have a license. Maybe you should, since there's been nothing done, why not do 20 tier 1 licenses?
So some of this is on the agenda tonight. So if it's cultivation related, are you going to stay for that agenda?
The reason I wanted to do in the public comment, because when I read the agenda, it's her recommendations about talking that article. It would be limited to that.
Right.
I don't care about you making new rules about cultivation that I don't even believe you can. But that's my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. You paid for lawyers, now you got a lawyer.
that's what I just wanted to bring up to the select.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment tonight that's not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. There's no new business that I know of. And is there a motion to approve the minutes, payroll warrants, and treasury warrants?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes 5-0. Pending contracts, any questions? Questions for Libby?
What?
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously. Public Health Department, we have monthly COVID report update. I think we have Jericho here. I think I see remotely.
Hello. Long time no see, Select Board. I'm reporting to you live and direct from the lovely remodeled trailer where we're doing a sign-up session for the COVID vaccine clinic that will be held this Saturday. We have quite a few more slots open. We just got them to add a bunch. So if anyone has been having trouble trying to sign up for that clinic, please try again right now. As at the moment, we have, I believe, time slots available all day. So if you're needing a third or fourth or any other dose, and you're above the age of 5, you can come in and get the a vaccine dose on Saturday at the Nantucket Elementary School cafeteria between the hours of 9 and 2. As to COVID levels at the moment, with the end of Stop the Spread testing, there are no more numbers to share. All of the testing being done is now either symptomatic or directly exposed, which means it is not particularly useful as a public health tool. But we did just get our most recent wastewater test, which does show a small but notable increase in the wastewater levels of COVID. Most likely, as the sample was taken on Sunday evening, it would be a daffodil-related increase. It'd be interesting to see where that goes next, although I expect it will climb slightly as we see more transient population in the summer seasons. Other than that, that is really all of the data I have to report on the COVID situation.
Thank you, Jericho. Any questions or comments for Jericho? Anything about COVID? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you, Jericho, for the
My
update.
pleasure. Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to Citizen Department Committee request. First up is Salt Marsh Senior Center request for a gift acceptance. And on these gift acceptance, we're going to try to say the amount, who it's from. So it's $250 to the Salt Marsh Senior Center from Aileen Hart. Thank you, Aileen. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept and send a letter of thanks.
Second.
Thank you, Melissa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously. Okay, number 2, we have Bartlett Tree Experts, request for waiver of town noise bylaw from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., April 28th to October 1st, 2022, for multiple locations for spraying. Libby's going to just give us a little.
Well, just as a very brief intro, they made the same request last year, and you all had a bit of public feedback about it. And the idea was to see if there had been any police reports between last year and now, which there have not, specific to Bartlett Tree. I don't know if anybody's on from
Jim Cook
Okay.
from Bartlett Tree is on if you have any questions.
Any questions for Jim Cook?
I
From
just
the
make
board?
a motion to approve it. I think this is the 3rd year.
It's
It's
been longer than that.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Jim, for coming on. That passed. And I mean, it sounds good. There was no complaints to the police department, so it's really good. Okay, number 3, Nantucket Preservation Trust request for preliminary review of historic preservation restrictions to be held by NPT for property located at 55 Union Street. I think Mary's here. Give us a little
Hi.
update. Hi, Mary.
Yes, this is pretty, standard thing. Just as a reminder, we go to the state, they look at the restriction. You look at the restriction, your town lawyers look at the restriction and decide that it's in the public good. And then we all decide that it is, it gets recorded. 55 Union Street is right there on the corner of Union and Dover, West Dover. It was constructed in 1835. You might have remembered that it was vacant for about 60 years, and then in 2015 it was restored. And there are homeowners who are voluntarily entering into this restriction. It's not a CPC project like some of them are, but it would just be great to preserve that structure and the streetscape at 55 Union. I hope you'll agree.
Great. Any questions or comments for Mary? Erica, you're looking at me like you're going to.
No, I was just going to say, just as a reminder, this is just the preliminary review. If everybody's
Yeah.
good, we will send it to town council and then bring it back for the approval.
Okay. Motion?
So, motion to approve
Do-
the preliminary review, is that what you need?
Just
need a motion?
motion to send it to town council.
Motion to send it to town council.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That passes. Thank you, Mary.
And the round cellar was really pretty amazing.
Yeah. Okay, Human Services Contract Review Committee, review of FY 2023 reports, recommendations for 2022 annual town meeting. I'm going to recuse. Dawn's going to take over. And because the organization I work for was applying for one of these grants, so I'm going to recuse.
Dorothy, did you want to come up? Yes, please.
Dorothy, do you want to just review it orally, or do you want me to put it up?
If you want to just review, I can review it orally, the numbers. Hi, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. We are making two recommendations, one under the Contract Review Committee under the Cannabis grant. That grant this year is $175,000, which we applaud the finance director for finding that extra money in the taxes for us. We are equally giving that money to Fair Winds for a peer recovery program and to Gosnell for a soap program. Gosnell started their program this year within their services to the island, and it just started about a month and a half ago. Are there any questions on that? Yeah, I don't think so. On the Contract Review Committee, I will read the allocations of funding. And did anybody have any questions on the report? Okay.
It was complete as usual.
Thank you. I tried. We are making the recommendation that the Safe Place get $70,000. That NAMI receive 101,823 out of 100. They made a request for 150,000. The Elder Services, we're making a request of 21,000, a recommendation of 21,000. Health Imperatives, 120,000. Fair Winds, 191,477. 18,000 to the Martha's Vineyard Community Services, 4,500 to South Coast Legal. The Interfaith Council, we are recommending 80,000. The Nantucket Cottage Hospital, we're recommending 0. And Small Friends, we're making a recommendation of 20,000. The Art Association, 20,200. Cape Mediation, 0, with a total of 650,000 in recommendations. And we had, as you can see, we had over $888,000 in requests. We did have an extra, and I should point out, in the Cannabis, we did have 3 candidates till the very end, and Addiction Solutions pulled out on the day that we were making our decision. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I was just going to say, I really enjoy this report every year. You really go into depth on the demographics and the needs of the island, and I just encourage everyone in the community to take a look at it. It's in the select board packet and on the website as well.
Thank you.
A couple of comments in there. I agree with Christy. You mentioned thinking about future generations in there. I thought that was interesting. I don't remember that in previous unsustainable growth and the impact it's having on your constituents, on our island.
Mm-hmm.
I thought was interesting. And the one I think that this board should think about that was in there was the social acceptance of alcohol. And I think we should be thinking whether we should be rethinking some of our drinking events and tying everything to drinking because of the issues that we're seeing with it. And I think that's a big policy decision for us to think about as a board. Everyone seems to think that you can't have an event on Nantucket without alcohol, or you can't raise money without alcohol. Maybe we need to shift that slightly and start to show that maybe you can. So I thank you for putting that stuff in the report. It's important.
You're welcome. I think one of the big things too is to look at how much our population has changed within the state, and the fact that we've had the largest growth within the state of any community at over 40%. That's huge in a decade. And I think we really should be looking at the impact that's having within our community as a whole.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very thorough as always.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion on that? It was just a, no. Okay, request for approval and execution of release of easements for areas E1 and E2 shown on plan of land entitled Roadway Easement Acquisition Plan, Hancock Street in Nantucket, Massachusetts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Jason. It's Ken Bogrand. This was before you last month, where we in fact took the property by eminent domain, and before you today is the release of these easements by your vote today. This transaction was approved at Articles 104 and 105 at the town meeting last year, and these are easements that go down the middle of a person's property over near Blueberry Lane. Town council has reviewed this and prepared the documentation, and it's the recommendation that these easements be released and that there be no compensation with respect to them, in view of the fact that they're not getting any extra property. This easement already exists on property that they own. I'd be happy to answer any questions with respect to this.
Okay, Don's handed it back over. Any questions for Ken?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Ken.
All right.
Moving on to public hearings. The first one, there's a request to continue to May 11th. Do you need to do anything with that, Erica?
We need to do a motion.
Okay.
Make a motion to continue to May 11th.
Second.
Thank you, Melissa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next one up, we'll open a public hearing to consider the taking of portions of Hawthorne Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Article 98 of the town meeting last year authorized the taking of portions of Hawthorne Street. This is part of the yard sale program. And basically you can see the three parcels that are involved in the different colors on the map that is on your place. We have obviously published the notice in the paper. We've also sent certified mail to the abutters, and we've heard from the abutters that there is interest in them when we come around to the disposition. Assuming that you approve this taking today, we will be back to you next month with respect to recommendations as to a disposition and the cost to the abutters for the disposition. We will at that point in time also have gone over with the people from Coastal Resiliency to make sure that there are no issues from that point of view relative to the disposition of these properties. So it is our recommendation. This has been reviewed by town council. The amount of square footage that's involved is just slightly over 16,000 square feet on the three parcels. And it's the recommendation of the real estate department and the REAC committee, which reviewed this to proceed forward with the taking by eminent domain of these three portions.
Thank you, Ken. This is a public hearing. Are there any comments from the public or the board? I'm seeing none remotely.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is closed.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Quick comment. I miss Catherine Stover. She had a lot of Catherine Stover in our packet, like a town meeting and stuff. And I was kind of sad.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we'll open a public hearing to consider an application for amendment to for amended bulk fuel storage license for Nantucket Memorial Airport. We have Chief Murphy here to.
Good evening. This is a amendment. They're simply changing the quantities they're storing on site. There's no additional total aggregate. It's changing from 100 low lead to avgas. There's one condition I ask on the license, just that they maintain the fire suppression system and fire alarm system they have on that property. They just put in.
Okay, just a question about that, because I saw that maintain as in keep it in place. It's
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, it's a public hearing. Any comments? The public?
And we do have Noah on if anybody has a question.
Okay. All right, is there a motion
Motion
to
to
close?
close the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes. Thank you. Okay, number 4. Open a public hearing to consider sidewalk dining permit fees and applications for 2022. Hi, Amy.
Hello.
Give me 1 sec.
I did say to open the public hearing, didn't I? I always forget. Public hearing's open.
Great. And that's my updated one, if I need.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so a couple points for clarification tonight for those listening and here tonight about what the goals are for this public hearing. The public hearing was set to vote on and agree to the newly formed sidewalk dining permit fees that we discussed last time. And we need to do a public hearing to establish any fees. And also the conditions we discussed for extending these outdoor dining permits. So I know there's been a lot of confusion internally, externally, all over about what this all means. I'm hoping to clarify that in the 3 avenues I believe that we have for restaurants and what they need to consider in this situation. So I updated some of these extensions. I have some photos here. Can we go to one more? There we go. Okay, so I try to better clarify this here. I'll go through this for those looking to discuss things. The temporary extensions that the state granted, I know it's confusing. State's confused, we're confused, most cities and towns are confused. It's open to interpretation, and it's to allow each town and city to kind of adapt to their conditions. Coming out of this pandemic and adapting are just as difficult as going in, so we're trying to interpret that. The extensions allowed for essentially automatic approval of those permits that we all issued at the beginning of the pandemic, okay? So it granted that those temporary permits that were granted on a local level were allowed to continue for 1 more year without going through the normal process that we have to go through. So they allowed for that to just happen. A lot of folks, Boston, us, asked for new applications because our program had expired in December, just to see who wanted to continue in that sort of situation. This does not require individual public hearings for each restaurant. This is really an extension of what existed. Anyone new who came along, and I know there is a new license coming up, they may want to have sidewalk seating. That's a whole new separate application. This is just discussing folks that had this during the state of emergency, okay? So I'm gonna outline here real quick, and hopefully this clarifies some things for us. Temporary extensions on Nantucket are primarily for public spaces and sidewalks only. Nantucket does not have a pre-existing sidewalk or public space dining program. Some cities did. Cambridge and others already had that set up. The extension allows for continuation of these pre-approved spaces while we determine a more permanent policy. That's the primary condition here, along with the conditions that we discussed that we determined through the past 2 years are needed to allow these spaces to continue. They should be allowed to continue if they meet those requirements. Secondly, as I just mentioned, temporary extension is for pre-existing spaces that operated under state of emergency conditions. New spaces require the usual full application of public hearing. Thirdly, and this is where the confusion comes in, temporary extensions for private property spaces mostly are allowed for following conditions only: to allow for, and this is statewide, additional time for them to go through the full permanent application for an alteration of premises Those have to go to the planning board, board of health, select board, and ABCC is required. This is somewhat of a bridge as that goes on for those spaces that might need that extra time and that are in the middle of that process. I'll just give you an example. We submitted the Brotherhood application to the state January 5th. I just got it back from them today. That's a long time. They're backed up. This extension allows for a bit of a bridge there, okay? There also, if they have no special permit, planning board, zoning restrictions that need to be amendment, and it's truly a temporary situation, I will give this, hasn't been applied for, but an example, fairgrounds. They might want to add those tables out front again. They have plenty of parking, no other restrictions. They may, unfortunately, not be open next year. So that might be a situation where they say, can we do a temporary extension with these conditions? That's an example. Finally, all spaces approved for, and again, let me just back up, and this is where it gets confusing for folks. During the state of emergency, we had exceptions to special permits, parking requirements, a lot of planning board situations. Those things no longer exist. So those things need to be tents, all sorts of things. And that really probably affects mostly tents everywhere, but mostly the parking mid-island and other folks. They have, some of them had special permits that restricted outdoor dining. They need to get that amended, things of that sort. So those things no longer exist. So we need to deal with those. All spaces approved for temporary extension under this program may not, and this is what we set prior to, increase their occupancy with the outdoor seating. The program allows for indoor seating to be moved outdoors. Increase in occupancy generally requires a full permanent application, and at the very least, review and inspection by health, building, and fire. If there's restroom requirements, if there's fire code situations, things of that sort. So I don't, if you have any questions as I go, that's how I see it. There's three avenues. Public sidewalks that existed, those setups, as long as they meet the conditions, we can move forward. In the middle, you have those that have to go through planning board or going through the full permanent process, need a bridge gap. They're meeting most of the requirements, and we can approve a temporary extension while that process continues. And then third are going to be a lot of folks that need to go for that permanent alteration, special permit, parking requirements, things of that sort. If they were in a parking lot or in their parking area, they need to kind of deal with that and get at least a sign off from planning board and things of that sort, if that makes sense.
And they should start that now because it takes so long.
Correct.
For next
So
year.
that's why this extension helps us in those situations. And I've gotten a lot of complaints of certain areas that I know we have to really kind of take a look at, and those might require some extra attention. But that extension can allow for those areas that maybe don't have a lot of issues, but they just need time to kind of go through the process. We can consider that. So my recommendation here is this evening to primarily focus on the sidewalk permit fees that we discussed. I amended them per our last conversation. Review the conditions again. I have included a list tonight of all the applications, the 9 I've received thus far, because they give you example of each of these conditions I just spoke about. It's not about to individually target them, but to show you kind of what we're talking about here. That would be the primary focus. And then if we received further applications or things, we would certainly report that to the select board, but you're not required to have a public hearing for each one because they're an extension of those permits. If there was a problem with one and we determined to push it to a public hearing, we can certainly do that. Does that clarify it all?
Yeah, so let's say there's, it's existing, there's no issues, it's not gonna come back here, it's gonna be, we're gonna set the fees and the conditions today.
Correct.
If it falls into that, it's fine.
Correct.
If there's some dispute or something funky, maybe it's not a public hearing, but it comes back and we can.
Correct.
If it's tricky, right, we would.
Everything will be reported to you regardless. I would provide a list like I have tonight of who's going through permanent. Already for May, I have a good 12 public hearings set. So bring a snack because it's gonna be a long night. But that's just where we are now, so. But anything that would come through would be reported to the select board, absolutely.
And those public hearings are there's one new for a sidewalk, but the rest are more of the private.
Yep, and then
spaces.
there's 3 new liquor license applications and a couple other things, amendments and things of that sort. But we're already packed and we haven't even kind of touched the surface on some of these folks. But that's an opportunity to do that. So there's still time for folks who, and when I kind of put out the application, I said, look, if you're confused, just fill this out and then we'll determine which direction you go in. Because some will have to unfortunately go through the permanent process, even though they want to do temporary, so.
Well, Christy, are you sure you want to leave? Because you're going to miss that night.
Well, she helped start
come
this
back.
whole thing, right?
You're getting out just in time.
So if we can move forward a little bit, okay, great.
Good?
So I'm going to start with the proposed sidewalk dining fees, and this is including the increase we discussed at the last meeting. We defined it by starting with no alcohol service for a common vicular only that doesn't serve alcohol on the sidewalk to be a $500 fee. Beer and wine license with up to like 3 tables or 12 seats. More than that, $1,500 with a beer and wine license. All alcohol license being at $2,000. Again, a maximum of 4 tops. And then more than that, if that exists, is $2,500. So those are the fees we discussed. Again, we're thinking May 1st or into May to stroll. And we'll go through some of the conditions as far as removing them when they have to. The tables fitting within the storefront and not extending to abutters. And then removed for any extended closures during the season, of course, and the ability to move them quickly if we have one of those fun hurricanes that comes up in the summer. So I think those are the main conditions here for the fees. If we can go up one more.
Did you get any feedback on the fees?
Any
pushback or
no, and some folks said, hey, that we know, we're saying, yeah, we will pay them. It's fair. There certainly was pushback from other restaurants that some restaurants got free space. So that was a contention for a while. So a lot of the restaurants said, yeah, we absolutely will pay it. It's something we want to do.
Okay.
So they were positive about that. So that was good. If we can flip to the conditions, flip 3, I think. One more. Okay. So as we talked before, anyone who comes into this and certainly is using public space will have to sign a hold harmless and agreement for use of space. Again, we discussed the hours of operation being no outdoor sidewalk seating shall be in use beyond basically 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. No additional entertainment permits or entertainment allowed on these sidewalk seating areas. A big one is maintenance of the public right of way, being fully responsible for that licensed area in front of their facilities, garbage, trash, waste paper, anything they can do to help keep things down, placement clips, cup holders, whatever they can do there, but they will be responsible for that area and around for that cleanup. Again, the ADA accessibility clearance is very important in clearing a pedestrian path, minimum of 4 feet, 5 feet preferred of sidewalk clearance in these areas. So we've measured that as best we could in those areas. So they need to maintain that and make sure people don't kind of move out into that space. Sidewalk dining and furniture and accessories. Again, a big one we've talked about again were the logos and things that were allowed on umbrellas and such. So we prefer plain umbrellas and such. They must be easily accessible on site. They should dismantle easily for storage, again, in case of emergency situations, and be kind of muted and with, the appearance of downtown. So they will also have to have, this comes up in one situation I'll talk about in a minute, proof of consent by third parties. If there's any sort of private property owners that are affected, and we do have a case with a public sidewalk that does have a 91 license on it that requires additional approval. So those things need to be done. We're not going to make any approvals in any case that it affects private property, even if the sidewalk's involved. Again, signage and advertising restrictions, as we just discussed. Heaters, which will provide the fire department approval and permit required for any proposed propane heating lamps, and those requirements, again, in our liability requirements with insurance coverage for those using town property and their usual liquor liability coverage. So that's the basic terms of agreement. Is there any questions there?
No, seems like that's most of it's what it was before.
Correct.
Just tidying up the logos and the umbrellas
It
and
is.
stuff like that.
It is. And of course, too, can we go to the next page real quick, is what the state kind of updated their guidelines for outdoor alcoholic beverage areas, which they just adopted this month, which is basically what we've had before, and some of the things we just went over too as well. Again, the select board as the local licensing authority has discretion to apply reasonable conditions to the outdoor alcoholic beverage service areas, such as requirement of food service and or seated service, which I think is what we've required across the board. It is for a seated food service, and we'll be consistent with that. So we have the right of way, the things. The other part too with the state is any outdoor area serving alcohol should have some sort of rope or some sort of definition to the area. So we'll have to work with folks on that. Most had somewhat of that, but we'll have to make sure we have some sort of definition of those spaces too, so they don't bleed into the public area. And then it's just the basic considerations we have. So if we can, real quick, go up to the pages where I list the applications. One more. Is it the first one? Oh, no, one more. It's down. Okay, so I did include a list, this first page. I received so far 9 official applications. And quickly, the first page here is all folks on public ways or the sidewalk, which is an example of folks that so far meet the conditions. The club car, again, tables up against their building there was never an issue. Plenty of space for the pedestrian way, the Rosencrown as well. Have 6 tables. They're requesting backyard barbecue. Again, had the 4 tables up against their building. The juice bar, again, is what we would consider, and Born and Bred both considered non-alcoholic spaces, would be the $500 permit. Juice bar, again, we have recommended to allow the closure of the South Beach extension again in the evenings after 5 p.m. We will provide the barriers to them to place and remove each evening. And they've already had their stanchions out. They're allowed to put the stanchions out, which have been very helpful to keep their line against the building and over into the street. So that should be helpful. Again, Born and Bred as well has 2 tables out in front on Center Street with enough room there. Now, the beat is an example of something that requires additional approval by those with the Chapter 91 license, which is supposed to remain open for pedestrian passage for those properties that have that license. They need to work an agreement, and we need to see a written agreement before that would be approved. Could we go to the next page?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amy, who's that agreement with? Is it with the state?
The property owners
Okay.
that have the license. So it's I read up on it, and it's a waterways thing with access, and generally because it's the properties on Easy Street there that have that, and it's supposed to be open for pedestrian passage. So it's a right of way, but they would need to, and they have been agreeable to it the past 2 years, but there's
the building owners. Okay,
yeah,
so
because
you're
we
not
went
looking
through
for,
that.
like state chapter.
No,
Okay.
no, we went through this originally, so they're, hopefully we're going to compromise, but they would have to do so.
Gotcha.
We're not going to get involved until such time that that's taken care of. So they're working on that. So a couple more here. Examples, and I'm using these are ones that came through Lola 41. That's a situation that had a tent up last year, and they are going before the planning to see if that would be approved again. So until that happens, they're looking for a temporary application. I think the concern with some of these is that we're requesting, if it's a temporary extension, that it's not a great increase in occupancy. That would not be fair and appropriate unless they go through the full process. So that's kind of where I think the sticking point has been. And most will say they won't increase the occupancy, that they are truly moving tables outdoors. So that's been our goal here, to make it fair.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go
These all private property, these 4, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to just show you kind of what came in and kind of show you where our thinking is and see if you agree with kind of the direction we're heading. Crew is another one. They have 9 tables there alongside their building on the dock. It is private. property. There is agreement for that use. Again, the concern would be increase in occupancy, but there's no other restrictions in this case to prevent this use. So there are some folks don't know they want to continue with this, or that might be doing renovations next year, or just looking to do a temporary extension. I think they can be considered in that sense, but the agreement would have to be no increase in occupancy unless they went and got that settled with health and building and fire and all that good stuff. Chicken Box is another, and it's an interesting situation where we did some creative permitting during the pandemic to allow food service on that location because they had none previously, of course, and they would not have been able to open at all for at least a year. So we did allow the mobile food unit to come there and service food so that they would be able to open and stay open. This is a case I think needs to go because of parking, special permits, and it's a completely separate operation from what their usual operation is, would require a permanent application. Planning board and such is an example of that.
So they couldn't get an extension while they're applying for that?
I don't think it would be. It's a difficult one, and I want to try to help, but they don't have existing food service. It's not replacing indoor tables with outdoor tables. It's a completely different service. We also have restrictions on food units, essentially in a busy area, restaurants like that, and we have a great deal of concern and issues from the neighbors and different residents in that area saying that the parking got shifted to other areas, that it's brought all sorts of other issues. So that's another issue where we're looking at it going, it's a completely separate type of business from what their general license is for. It also requires special permit to waive parking requirements. It got rid of a lot of parking in that area. They have an existing special permit where some parking requirements were waived when they did some, I think, renovations in the 90s or something, but it still requires, because they're in the Mid-Island district there, it does require some review.
Did they know all this 3 or 4 months ago? Because we didn't really, because the state didn't tell
know.
us.
Yeah. And honestly, I flipped on this one recently completely, because it's just based on what we're telling everyone else and based on the fact that these exceptions don't exist anymore. So until we say for everyone, because, and I blame myself for this, I'm doing things individually, trying to help this one. We have 100 liquor licenses, a good portion of these wanting to do something. We need to have very defined paths for each one that are consistent. And we're saying for anyone, Island Kitchen came before you recently, and they went to the planning board, got whatever restriction amended so that they can permanently have their outdoor dining. We need to be consistent with that, because the one-offs are difficult. We also, and I don't want to get too far into this one, I got 5 letters today about. So it's something we need to look at on a more.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I always like to have food with alcohol. I just think it's better for everyone.
But they don't have on-site food preparation. So to have a common vicular, they would need to have on-site food preparation and seating for folks. So that's why we did this with Cisco too during the pandemic, is to create a food permit for the mobile unit that let it qualify to be open. So it's not a common vicular. It's a different, the mobile food unit becomes a mobile unit situation. So that's why it started to come like, well, we're making a special exception for this one location. Not that it can't continue, but it should go through the proper review process that everyone else is having to go through. Unless someone completely says, okay, we're going to let it go and you don't have to go through the planning and all of that, which I don't think we're doing. Those exceptions don't exist anymore.
You're looking at Libby right now with the magic wand.
Oh, no, I don't know. I was not. I was not.
Looking at Melissa, sorry.
Don't get me in trouble.
No, look, I really, I see what you're saying, and it's a really tricky situation. I know that those businesses at a time, and particularly the Chicken Box at a time when resources were thin, made investments in that space to be able to stay open and sustain their business. And I really hate to see them not be able to utilize that and I think it's been a great asset. There's not a lot of opportunity for outdoor dining in that area.
Right.
So, and I'm a big fan of the mobile food units and being able to use them and give them a place to go. We need more places, I think, where people can, grab an easy bite to eat and sit outside. Island Kitchen on any given day in the season is just packed.
Right.
So, I feel you, and I also feel concern that we're cutting off our nose to spite our face, and I'm not sure how to make this able to be successful for them.
Right. I don't think that we're saying they shouldn't be able to do it. It's they need to go through, does there need to be a parking waiver? It's causing a problem up with other businesses and homeowners.
Right.
I said 5 emails this afternoon about what, they've been dealing with. So it's understanding that if we're telling everyone, if you have a special permit restricting certain uses here, you need to go through that and get that waived. Again, we can provide an extension to allow for that timing. If you say so.
That's my concern, is that if you know now, and we all know now that this is required, then to get that in the hopper for this season, it could be by July or August by the time maybe that they even.
But
sorry.
Sorry.
Thanks, Erica. I need to be closer.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing I'll say is, in these cases where we do receive a great deal of comments from the public and other businesses that are negatively impacted, that we need to kind of deal with that and see how we might be able to, if we are going to provide an extension for folks, alleviate some of those issues that they're having. So that's where it's kind of like, as much as I want to support the restaurant, we have to, kind of look at who else this might be impacting on a negative basis.
Dawn?
Yeah, I would just echo Melissa's comments. I feel like it's going to be such a hardship to kind of shut down what they've been doing at the 11th hour. I mean, it's going to be May in a few days. So I'd like to see us work out something temporary while they go through a more permanent permitting process.
Correct. We would just require that to go that, so that folks that might have an issue with that parking have a voice to say that. So I think it's an example of something that will require a little bit further review to understand the domino effect some of this is having on other locations and other businesses that might have a negative impact because of this.
Yeah, I think we're going to greatly need the additional seats this summer with other things that are shutting down.
I was just going to say that there's going to be such a need for people to have a place to go.
Right.
Are those comments, Amy? They go right to you. So can you encourage people to be in touch with us? Because I've heard no comments or feedback.
I will send. I can send those to you. Those have been recent in the past 2 days. Someone reached out to me. I said, just send everyone here so that we can gather them and provide them.
I just think it's important, if the community has concerns, that we are aware of what they are, so we can help problem solve around them too.
Absolutely. And I kind of wanted to tonight approve the conditions and make sure we're all on the same page for the process and the 3 silos we want to go down. So in this case, where we might have to bring up a public hearing or have that discussion and understand that process, that we can do so. And because I would like to, in these cases, certainly let folks have the ability to be heard.
Yeah. And you're right. It is a very unique situation in that they were operating outside of what they were permitted to do, but it was win-win. Maybe lose for some inconvenience for sure, but
right.
Well, that's the question I have on the loss. That was we're getting a bit into weeds here with my question, but the box, that's their parking lot, right? Their parking spaces. So I think people were just used to be able to park there during the day and go do their business.
Right.
It's not other businesses parking.
Right.
So it's more of they're not used to it.
Right.
It's a facility that can fit 300 people that has parking at night, and then this is where the problems are happening, because those spaces aren't open, because people are congregating in other parking areas where people live.
Right.
So it's, again, a domino effect.
It's
it might not be
issue.
exactly correct.
I was just thinking daytime.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I was thinking
But
daytime.
I thought that too.
Yeah.
I thought, we're also used to be able to park there and run into the pharmacy and whatever in the Stop and Shop. And yes, but you're right. At night, there's a significant loss of parking because that structure's not able to be shut down and reopened during the day.
Correct. And it's just led to, and again, it's a nightclub, so it has, there's already, that situation set up, and it's like I said, 300 occupancy. So that's where it tends to back up.
I'd be interested to see how many spaces that is. If you're talking 16, 20 spaces, that's not going to touch.
Yeah.
Parking's going to overflow everywhere anyway, and it has for 20 years. That's only my, what's the big difference?
I'll send you the comments,
right.
I'm sure.
And
people sit out on the tables, and it becomes again, a domino effect, and it builds on each other. So I just want to make sure that we hear. And again, this isn't a situation where inside tables are being replaced for outdoors. Again, and again, it is allowing alcohol service outside of the building, which hasn't happened. And it's been a touchy subject in that situation. So again, it's me not wanting to create too many exceptions because it's just impossible to manage. And not as fair. So that's an extreme situation. I'll finish up with.
Can we go to Chrissy real quick?
I just want to comment on the box. I think it would be beneficial if we find a way to extend it for this season and maybe put in some restrictions, like it needs to be shut down by 7 or 8 p.m. As it changes over to a nightclub. But as if we've been saying, for it to go through the planning process and everything, just to have it not be an option this summer, I think would be detrimental to our community.
Yeah, and I think it'd be helpful to, I shared the comments indirectly with them, but not the names, but to have the folks maybe meet and get together. I found that's helped too as well, but I just want to make sure that they're heard too as well, because it's
Be curious if some of those concerns existed before the pandemic.
Yes, and I did mention that to them. I said some of these are an issue I'll share with Patrol and others that might deal with this on a daily basis too. But again, I think it brings it to the forefront, and this is their opportunity to comment on it, and this might make it worse. So I just want to make sure both sides are heard in that situation. And again, not too many exceptions. So we'll do that. Again, Charlie Noble's another example, and they may wish to do a temporary extension at addition of those seats on the back patio. Again, and I think they feel better with a temporary extension as they try to figure out if that works for them. It seems perfect. It's a wind tunnel. It's where, their garbage is. They have to try to figure out how that works for their business. So I think it's probably something we can consider a temporary extension for. So these, I just thought at least gave us examples of all the things I've been talking about.
These are great.
Okay.
Jason, may I make just one more observation? I think we're seeing this as the season starts, that already restaurants are they're not in the clear because life for some have returned to normal. There's severe staffing shortages. Even if they could increase occupancy, they don't have the ability to serve.
Correct.
So I think that we're going to have, hundreds of thousands of people coming to our community. We've got closed restaurants and already limited ability to meet the demand of just, breakfast or lunch. So I think as we're thinking about these extensions this year, we have to be realistic about the challenges. The pandemic's not over for our restaurateurs, and by any shape of the imagination.
Right. Correct.
For most businesses, actually, in our community, but as we're talking about restaurants.
Yeah, correct. And like we said, coming out of this pandemic and transitioning is just difficult. We haven't done it before. So trying to figure that out. And a lot of the streets that were closed, that we couldn't have done it anyway because of staffing, because of location, because they couldn't maintain it. So there's a lot that goes into these decisions other than, oh, it's fun, or, oh, it's not fun. So there's been a lot of discussion.
I like the flexibility that temporary extensions give us to navigate this year and get on more solid footing.
Yeah.
Just quick comment. I think, I agree with, trying to find something for, temporary, to do something this year. But I also think there's things that we don't even know on a lot of these special permits. We haven't looked at every one. We don't know what the comments were 20 years ago, 10 years ago. I think we have to be careful not to insert ourselves into that and not to, bias that, let them go through it. I think, I think in the case of some that we're talking about, I think that there's a solution. It would happen fairly quickly, but I think it should go through the process. Maybe it won't happen quickly, but I hope it will. And I think they should go through the process. If we have to extend it a little bit or only allow it if they've applied,
Right.
something like that, that's fine with me. But, and I think you're absolutely right when you talk about the staffing issues, it's hitting everyone. And I think that the restaurants sort of were in it earlier. And it's the lack of housing that I've talked about all year. And I think it's not gonna, the restaurants were the tip of the iceberg. It's starting to hit other industries now, is what I'm hearing. And I think that people are gonna have to be very patient this summer. It is not gonna be normal, and it's not gonna be normal next summer. And hoping it will and praying, thinking it will and praying it will isn't gonna make it that way. I think we're in a rough patch from an employee standpoint going forward. And I think we have to, sort of grapple with that, policy-wise and big picture-wise.
I guess just one last thought is that what I love about this, Amy, is that with some conditions, the temporary extensions give us even some more space to make this a sustainable add-on so that it's something that restaurants and the businesses can continue to rely on. And if they want to, if they want to take the extra step to do these permitting and sort of change the nature of their business, then they can do that. And I think there was a lot of value add, and I like the way that you've set this up. I think it's very clear.
Thank you, Melissa. Anything else, Amy? You want to review?
Let's see. So if we want to talk about the final discussion, do you want to take any public comment before we summarize? Or
I've seen no hands coming up. This is a public hearing, so if anybody wants to speak, they can, online or in the room. Deborah?
Hi, thanks for doing this tonight. Deborah Pitcock from the Rose and Crown. I would just like to point out that I'm not sure people realize how much outdoor dining has revitalized downtown Nantucket in a way that we haven't seen in 25 plus years. And going forward, I think it's important that we think about allowing us to continue on public way, allowing people to alter their private spaces and do it now or in the near future so that we're not scrambling next year if we decide we want to do this again. And I appreciate all of Amy's work and your work because I know it's been a lot to handle. But I really want you guys to understand I've been in a restaurant in downtown Nantucket since 1990, and it's been a game changer having outdoor dining. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done. Thank you.
Deborah, could you mentioned something to me. We were talking about this one day about how it's the outdoor dining has changed your business a little bit, or
it
allowed
has.
you to.
It's changed our business. I feel that it's made our business more family friendly. I think it encourages us to look at our business in a different way and maybe take into consideration that food and the bar life are a little different out here now. And we are kind of gearing ourselves towards going more towards family and food centered business than nightclub late night. Not that we're getting rid of that, but it's not the thing that sustains our business anymore. Like food, service, families, people coming in for the day is a big portion of our business now, as opposed to the late night side of things. So it really has changed the way we look at things and how the pandemic allowed us to see that our business and our building could be utilized in a different way. And outdoor dining was a huge part of that. So.
Thank you. I thought that was interesting. Thanks. Amy?
Hi, thank you. Amy Young from The Beat. Thank you all for opening up this discussion. I just want to kind of mirror off what Deborah is saying, but I have a completely different experience because I've only been doing this for a handful of years with The Beat. But I will say that just from a guest perspective, Already in the last couple of weeks, we've had multiple people asking us, when are the seats coming back? When will we be dining outside? When can we bring our dogs on the patio? You know, so it's definitely something that our guests are looking forward to this summer. And I know the Beat has a special kind of situation where we are, which I'm still trying to understand a lot myself in terms of who actually has the rights to our right of way. But I'm working through that, and I'll get with Amy on that separately. But I think that ultimately, you know, we're just trying to do what's best for what people are looking for here. And now that they've had a couple of years, they've seen how great this outdoor dining experience can be, then, you know, they're really looking forward to having that again this summer. So any considerations that you can make with that are appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Amy Baxter.
Thank you. That was interesting what Deba had to say. It's good to hear too. Just one other comment too, and I know I shouldn't read online comments, but a lot of the street closures and things of that sort, it involves a lot more than just saying no to it. There was private property owners, there was restaurants that maybe couldn't staff the area. We love it. It'd be great if there were more pedestrian plazas or spaces to do that in the future, and I think we encourage that, but it just didn't work for a lot of different reasons for those things. But it's certainly something to consider for the future as far as how we can make that work.
And I loved the idea. I think Christy had it of entertaining that during daffodil stroll, like sort of special shoulder seasons where the impact for parking may not be quite as huge as July or August, but we still have this huge influx of people who need to be serviced.
Yeah.
And you know, it's some creative ways to think about using that space.
We definitely, we had ideas, you know, during the pandemic that we weren't able to really get going that could certainly work in that area. Mm-hmm. So just so folks know, it's certainly something to consider, that the decision was made for a lot of different factors moving forward. So
okay, I feel like we've had a pretty. Go ahead.
I just have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
In the feedback, and I loved what Deba's comment about revitalizing downtown. I certainly witnessed that myself. Have you heard from retailers? Are they like, I mean, I know that there's retailers who are maybe abutting
next to it.
People who are feeling a little bit crowded in. So, but you know, I remember being able to go into town for an ice cream at 7:00 at night and retail shops were still open.
Right.
That's not the case often.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that it can be some win-win for them, that there's people in town enjoying themselves, walking around and doing some early evening shopping.
Or if it got cold, it depended. And I have gotten comments, some negative ones. Some felt they were hurt and actually showed actual figures on days they were dining or they had less business. Mm-hmm. Some did get buried within street closures, and you know, I understand that completely. Yeah. Then there were others that took the attitude at first were negative and said, oh, wait a minute, people might get chilly. Right. I can sell blankets. That's right. You know, so they took a good attitude and said, ooh, this could work for me. Yeah. So it depended on the attitude. And again, certain locations, they did get buried by some of those structures, and I get it. Mm-hmm. So, and it felt like everything was put to the restaurants and these other folks were struggling too. Mm-hmm. So you're always going to get that. Yeah. You know, and we always hear the negative stuff. People don't call me and say, hey, that was great. Please do, by the way. But
really,
so
please.
Yeah,
the good stuff.
If you like something, you can call me too. But so we heard both sides of that. Okay. So that's why some of those decisions were made.
And we have to think about the fairness issue for the places that don't get it.
Yeah.
And you know, just there's not an unlimited, it seems like there's an unlimited demand, but there's not an unlimited demand. When some person can do more business, someone else might not be. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we have to be cognizant of that and not tilt it too much any one direction. So
yeah,
you know, and that's what I think you're doing a good job of that, but that is not an easy thing to do. There are some people, some restaurant people who feel very strongly that this, you know, that we should go back to the way it was, that this isn't fair at all, because I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, that's sort of the attitude. And so, you know, I think proceeding as we're doing is smart.
Yeah, I'm sure folks, when they're choosing locations in the future for the restaurants, will choose differently. They said, well, 10 years ago, you didn't predict the pandemic was coming. You needed outdoor space. Unfortunately, it was the luck of the draw as to what you had chosen for your location prior to. So hopefully, as much as we can certainly help folks to do that.
Okay, I think anything else? I'm ready to close the public
Yeah.
hearing.
Nope.
Is there any other comments from the board or anybody online or here? Yep.
Everybody, I'm Phil Osley, Sunken Ship, Rose and Crown Juice Bar. First of all, I want to thank you because my daughter had sleepless nights worrying about how long her line was. And if I was selling stock to someone and that was their only complaint, I would buy that stock so quickly. But I want to thank you for allowing her to have that street closure. Otherwise, it wasn't going to work because the line for the juice bar was going up past the corner table. They had to hire bouncers to keep the line going. So I commend you. It was a really tough job, from the depression of not being open at the Sunken Ship and having Rose and Crown, no business there, and the juice bar, no business there, to you folks somehow got it all turned around so that everything worked. Everything worked and people were okay. And so I want to thank you. And in terms of retailing, our business almost doubled because Nantucket turned into not a parking lot downtown, it turned into a viable, fun place to just walk around. Because every place you go up Main Street, those stores, those restaurants are busy too. It wasn't just this one area that was busy, the whole island was busy because everyone could have fun and not worry about having that mask on and am I going to catch COVID from him or from her? So you're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Phil. I'll pass a lot of that compliment on to Amy and public safety and everybody who worked on that
You guys
for
too.
chamber, so it was a lot of effort to figure all that out.
And certainly the juice bar, we're having issues with the line and folks, they did hire bouncers, along with us saying we just need folks to help people cross the street and stuff like that, because people on vacation like to walk in the street. And so, which don't get me started, but so they worked along with us. So
I try to always walk on the sidewalk when I visit somewhere else.
yeah, I know. It's crazy.
I'm not 100% good at it, but I try really hard.
Yes. And people don't realize that like the night or the day before we were opening some of these things, a car went up on the sidewalk on Main Street. And I don't think I slept for 2 years after that. But so everyone kind of helped with that. So we appreciate that.
Any other public comment? I don't see any online. Okay. There's no comments on the board. Is there a motion?
Motion. Oh, sorry, Don, you go ahead.
Motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 That motion passes unanimously.
And quick comment, what we just heard from Phil about the parking and it wasn't just a parking lot, people were able to do that. That comment is what happens when you institute paid parking. All the businesses worry that it's going to hurt them. All of them think that, I've read a lot about it, all of them think it's going to hurt their business. Then the places that put paid parking in, the businesses a year or two later are saying, thank you, it was the best thing you ever did. We have been busier than ever. And I think that we have to, what he said is, if we ever get around to doing it, is what I think we're going to hear a year or two into it. It's going to be really unpopular and everyone's going to hate us and not want us to do it. But once we do it, have the guts to do it, I think we're going to be surprised in hearing a lot of those kind of comments. So just keep that in mind if we ever get enough guts to move forward.
And staff.
Yeah.
And just a last word to Christy too. Again, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
She's
Amy.
great to work with and you'll be missed.
I'll still be around to help.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to approve the fees and the conditions. Is that correct?
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I did. In my bad positioned microphone. Bad lead.
Aye.
I know.
I believe that was unanimous. Was that a yes for you, Matt? I didn't catch everybody.
Yes.
Okay. So you needed the fees and the conditions
Correct,
passed, right?
correct.
Okay.
Am I good?
All right.
I can go?
You go. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Thank you, Amy. Okay, town managers report.
First item is review of host community agreement policy terms for marijuana cultivators, cannabis cultivators. We've received our first request for a cannabis cultivators business. We've consulted town council, and Nicole Costanzo from town council's office is on the meeting. Her advice is that one of the first things that should be done is for us to negotiate a host community agreement with the business, which necessitates the board's approval of terms that it would like to see in such agreement, and there is a draft in your packet. Nicole, I don't know, maybe if you could give a little overview of cannabis cultivator situations in towns?
Sure. So the town does have a similar procedure that you had established for retail establishments. This host community agreement policy is for cannabis cultivators. It guides the application process if someone does want to propose a cultivation establishment in town. It sets forth the application requirements to ensure that it's a fair procedure and it's streamlined, and so that everyone understands the materials that they're required to submit to the town. Part of those requirements would be certificate of good standing to actually make sure that the establishment is a formed corporation, that they have some site control, so documentation to show that they have a lease or they own the property that they're interested in, some evidence that they actually have looked at the town zoning bylaws and they do comply with the zoning bylaws and that they're in the right district. Additional information that's requested through this draft host community agreement policy is a proposed timeline and development plan from the establishment so that the town can see how long this is going to take before the operation is up and running. Business plans, evidence of financing to ensure that the company actually can get up on its feet. In addition, some mitigation plans for light, noise, odor. And then there's also provisions in here that allow the applicants to set forth their plans for positive impacts to the community. The Cannabis Control Commission does require that marijuana establishment applicants do submit a positive impact plan. So this is something that companies will be required to set forth in their application for state licensure, but it's nice. A lot of communities do like to see the plans up front so that they can tell their citizens what actually is being proposed here. So some examples that we see are companies agree to some volunteer activities, sponsoring educational programs, local hiring preferences. And so we've set forth a provision in this policy to allow them to develop those plans and put them forth with the town. There's also in here, it streamlines the timeline, I'll say, for getting a host community agreement. So first they would submit their application. The town would ensure that all of the materials in there are complete. Once that's done, the company would have their community outreach meeting, which again, applicants for state licensure are required to hold a community outreach meeting, and that's an opportunity for them to present their proposal to the town and for the town to have public comment. So here through this policy, what we're asking is that companies actually coordinate with the town to make sure that people are aware of when the community outreach meeting is going to be held, and to schedule it so that it minimizes conflict with other meetings of some other boards that might be going on at that time. Once the application review is complete, at that point, we would begin negotiation with the establishment to enter into a host community agreement. And then that agreement, once we go back and forth, would be presented to the select board for your review and approval. So really, again, this policy streamlines the process, makes everyone aware upfront what their obligations are, and it just makes it a little bit more simpler for the town to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly and that the same, requirements are being asked of all applicants.
Any questions for Nicole? Do I need any clarifications of what we're doing tonight versus later? Versus special permits versus planning board?
I guess I do have and I don't know if this is necessarily a question for Nicole or the process, but is there a limit to how many cultivator licenses we could approve? Is that limited somewhere by us?
So
I'm not sure. Oh, go ahead, Nicole. Thanks.
The town zoning bylaws don't include a limitation for marijuana cultivators. The limitation that you have is on the number of retailers. The town could, through a zoning bylaw amendment, adopt a limitation on the number of cultivators, but you don't have one currently.
Okay. And I guess another question I would have is, do you define cultivator by how much they produce and who they sell to? I.e., does a cultivator have to produce for a commercial entity only?
So marijuana cultivator is a term defined by the state.
Okay.
It would be a category of a marijuana establishment. They wouldn't be able to sell directly to consumers. They would have to sell either to a retailer or a product manufacturer or some other marijuana establishment. They wouldn't be able to sell directly. They wouldn't be able to deliver directly to consumers. It's more of a wholesale operation.
Okay. And that would be limited on Nantucket because we can't, cannabis, thank you, cannot cross the water. So any cultivator on Nantucket would be limited to producing for our current retailers.
Unless something changes
Right.
federal
Federally.
level.
Okay.
I have a question. Has this been to our cannabis committee for comment? Have they looked at it?
No.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
No, they haven't. And, but primarily it's based on the one we already have.
Right.
So I guess we were feeling like we already have one. We could certainly send it to them if you all want.
Is this the time where we would talk about any fees or taxes, and can you even put any of that on cultivators, similar to the dispensaries? Erica, will you?
I would address that to town council.
Nicole?
Sure. So in my opinion, you can have a fee for processing a host community agreement application like you would for any other fee that you would have. If you have dog licensing and you have an application fee in order to process those applications. So it would have to be reasonably related to the costs of the town. When you start talking about fees that could be included within the host community agreement itself, that would be subject to negotiation. For retail establishments, you would have a retail tax if you adopted that locally through your town meeting. That tax couldn't apply also for cultivation establishments, but there could be some monetary provisions in a host community agreement, subject to negotiations, of course.
Thank you. I don't know if we want to tax it twice, because then it just raises the price that's going to the retailer and on and on. But I'm just curious about that.
I think I had one. Oh, I'm sorry,
Erica?
I was just going to note, I'm sure you all saw it, that there are two fees included in this. One is the application fee, and then we need to do, we need input from you about the escrow amount for legal. And town council, that's on page 4 of the document. We had a number in there. Town council said it was a little bit higher for the average. So We're looking to you to decide what that should be.
Yeah, 156 of the packet.
What,
I don't have that up because I have Zoom up.
yeah, what is that
Oh,
number?
here.
If you
It's
can-
We had 2,500 in, and they were recommending it to be between 3 and 5 grand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if it's, if it's escrow, won't anything left over go back to them?
Mhm.
So why don't we just make it 5,000?
It's fine with me. Can you remind me what this is for?
It's for legal review and preparation of documents and things like that.
For
I can make
purposes
that a
of covering
motion.
illegal expenses associated with registration of a host community agreements with the balance of unused funds to be returned to the applicant at the time the host community agreement is signed, or additional funds to be provided if the negotiations are protracted. So,
Yeah, I'm fine with 5 because it goes back after it's all said and done. So we can put that in the motion at the end. So we're deciding on escrow amount. What other points? Just because it's hard for me to have it in front of me and look at the hands going up for attendees. Is there anything else we need to decide on, Erica or Libby or Nicole?
Unless there's anything else within the document that you have any issues with.
It's not a public hearing, but if anybody wants to speak on this, they can. Anybody who's here? Rob?
We're going to go back in time a little to the last host agreement. And I believe that, Jason, weren't you on the team that negotiated with the two?
Yeah, I was chairing the select board at the time.
Are you, looking back at that experience, what have you learned?
What have I learned?
Yeah, because the rules have changed since then. Nantucket was in the forefront of limiting and in host agreements. We had some of the most aggressive host agreements that some of those things probably wouldn't stand up in court today. Do you agree with that?
I'm not on trial here. I'm not sure.
I'm not asking you.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Bob. I mean, I looking back on it, I think we decided with the information we had, we made good decisions and we limited it to just 2. I think we did okay there, but there's no data for me to look at.
But the state changed the rules concerning host agreements
Okay.
because of aggressive towns wanting too much from a company. It's really simple. Now, the fact that you're talking about another host agreement, but I'm pretty sure that the rules 4 years ago, you were limited in everything. Cultivation, I remember seeing it in parentheses, you wanted only 2 licenses on Nantucket. Now, without any change of the rules, you want to have more. From what I understand, you're willing to give another cultivation license out. When 4 years ago, you made it only 2 licenses on Nantucket. You didn't specify. It might have ended up as being specified about retail, but cultivation was part of that thinking by the board. I just want you to think about this before you rush ahead like you did before.
Erica?
I was just going to note that HCA's are a required part of any business with cannabis. I mean, the state requires HCA's. So we're just making sure that we are putting in place a framework that is for the most benefit of our community, not just necessarily the town of Nantucket, but our community members. And if my memory is correct, we as a town said to retailers, we've never discussed cultivators in this process before. This is now a new thing that's coming before us, so we're presenting you with this. They're completely separate. They're not the same animal. Retail versus cultivation.
Yeah, but retailers they cultivate within their place. So by essence, they're cultivators, but not by technicality and
They
terms.
were required to
Right.
cultivate on their own here. They're not in other
Right.
communities because they're not limited by the same geographical limitations we are. I do think it's an interesting point to, and that's why I asked, I'm not even sure where that limitation would come in. Would that be the select board? Would that be zoning again? If we wanted to set some parameters on how many cultivators, and I think it's also important to understand from a retail perspective, how much product do they need help with? I mean, from what I understand, Act Natural has had significant challenges staying open because of testing requirements, and those are really rigorous. Green Lady goes in and out of product all the time because they can't keep up with the demand. So I think there's a need for additional cultivation for the legal sale of cannabis.
And I would note too that, I'm sorry, Libby, it's only allowed in certain zoning districts. So it's not like we can have cultivation licenses all over the island. I mean, our zoning bylaw restricts it to certain zoning districts.
Libby?
I was just going to mention that I admit I haven't been laser focused on this, but there were initial discussions about limiting the number of cultivators. And I think the idea was, let's see how it goes. And if we start getting flooded with applications, we should take a look at it.
I would note the chair of the Cannabis Advisory Committee is.
Yep, I see him.
Yeah. Just make
I
sure.
agree with Erica that you should do the best you can for Nantucket. I just think going overboard is one thing, but we did talk about cultivation and cultivators because I wanted it to be like Scarlet. A lot of little licenses. There's 200-300 people growing every summer. Has there been lots of problems with police and local 12 plant? No, it's not that big a deal. I talked about the number of cultivators, licenses, and that. And my take in this, and not being a lawyer, was you said too. You didn't even want to do it. So the next year, I went to town meeting. I put in a warrant to have a committee. The committee hasn't come up with its recommendations. 1 year was COVID. The town asked you to do this in a year. Now we're 2 years later, and you're about to make rules again. It's hard for me to understand.
Thank you, Bob. Matt?
Yeah, my understanding is that we, I'm going back, and there was, my recollection is the committee was going to be working on sort of craft, what the rules would be for craft growers like you're talking about. That was something that Rita, when she was on the board, talked a lot about, saying that was important. I think that it's been interrupted by COVID and by everything else. I think that, maybe there is different tiers of it as we go forward. And I agree with Bob. There are a lot of people that are growing and it isn't an issue. And there are some people who've been growing for a long time and it hasn't been an issue. But I think there's a way to do it. I think this is a good step for, what we've got in front of us now. But I think the committee should get together and figure out how to do the others if it's possible. So.
Thank you.
What the committee was going to
Hold
do.
on a second. Can we go to Barry Rector? He's had his hand up for a while.
Good evening, everyone. Hi. Hopefully you can hear me.
Go ahead, Barry. Yep.
Good. Okay. Thank you. We knew this was going to be, unfortunately, we didn't find out about this until this hit the Facebook pages and stuff almost about 2 days ago. So we had no precognizance of the Bartletts going and preparing to do a full-fledged marijuana cultivation center. There was some talk about hemp, but that falls under a whole different category. A few months ago, we had the opportunity to talk with Nicole, town council. She was very instrumental in providing some guidance. So I just want to reiterate some of the points that she's brought up. Your licenses right now are only on retail establishments, nothing else. So if someone wants to be a cultivator, if they want to do delivery systems, there's no restrictions at the moment. It will default back to what is under the current law through the Cannabis Commission. And Nicole, I would love to jump in at this point if I misspeak on anything, because you were instrumental in kind of guiding us. You're right, though. There's been a lot of changes that have taken place, and we're trying to be cognizant of what those changes are and how they are going to start dovetailing into Nantucket. But the only two marijuana-related uses that are here on the island right now are the two Melissa just identified. That's it. So if there's smaller craft cultivators and stuff going on out there, nothing has come before any board for any of that. And that's a whole different system altogether. But I dearly love for you to be able to include us into that conversation. One of the topics we're going to wind up talking about is to actually look at the host community agreement. It may be a little bit too late for this right now, but Nicole did say as well too, she's provided us one or two examples from other communities. Realize when we first started this process, there's been a lot of changes that have taken place. And so to stay on top of those changes has just, it is a chore and a half. But as other communities have done it as well too, they also take their information and begin to refine it. So we've just started on that pathway, and next month we're actually going to get a little bit more into the host community agreement, just to do a cursory review on it and see if there's anything that triggers up as well. So, I look forward to working with you. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to be there tonight, but anyways, I knew this was going to come up before you, and at least wanted to make sure we offer our services, dial in a little bit, maybe clarify some misperceptions that are out there, and see where that takes us to from there. So unless you have any questions or anything for me, I really appreciate the time and allowing me to speak for a few minutes.
Thank you, Barry. Libby?
I just want to mention that the host community agreement was developed in conjunction with town council. It is pretty standard. We'd be happy to invite a member of the CAC to assist with the negotiation of this when it is time for that. And Bartlett still does have to go through a special permit process with the planning board. So there's plenty of opportunity for that input.
If I remember right, I think Rita was, we were going through that, having meetings on the island with growers, trying to figure out a way to do a co-op or to do it individually. And individually wasn't really worth it because what the state requires you to do with security, it was too big of a capital expense. So then they went to, co-op if lots of growers could come together and use the same space. And that was really complicated. Doesn't mean it can happen now maybe. But I think that was some of the challenges that I remember trying to figure out how to get the growers involved into the business part of it. So where are we at now?
Yeah, I was just going to ask what do we need to do to move this forward?
Adopt or amend in any way that you would want the
Policy and procedures.
Policy and procedure for marijuana cultivator license applicants. That's what's before you. And it sounds like the possible desired fee would be $5,000 to go into an
I'll
escrow.
move to adopt with the $5,000 escrow fee.
Second.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Is this where you'd want to change the language to cannabis instead of marijuana in this document, or does it need to be changed?
I don't think so right now. I think we could look at that later. Yeah.
I took it from the state. So.
Yeah. It's fine. I'm just something I was thinking about. Anything else? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Okay. Then once that gets figured out, then we'll see how many people apply, and we'll take the next steps.
Oh, I just, my question about the limitation of cultivator licenses, is that select board policy or?
That would be a zoning change.
Okay.
It sounds like. Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Yes, in my opinion, you would need to amend the zoning bylaw to establish limitation.
Okay.
We have to amend it to limit it, or
You would have to make an amendment for a limitation, yes.
Right, because currently there is no cap on it. The
Right.
cap only exists for retail.
Right.
Okay.
We also could only approve what we see fit as well. So we could have our own potential limit on it. Or does that get tricky, Nicole? So if there's 5 applications and you only pick one, are we opening ourselves up for legal issues?
You'd have to have a good faith reason, in my opinion, to deny a host community agreement to someone. You couldn't use a host community agreement to circumvent zoning.
Okay. All right, something to think about.
Yeah.
Barry, do you have another comment? He's got his hand up.
Hold on, let me bring him back in.
Thanks. Hopefully you've got me back again. I'm sorry to have to interrupt one more time. You know, one thing I want you to consider with cultivators as well too is that they can't sell. They've got to have a place to send it to. So if you're thinking about putting a cap on it, I think, you know, we need to have a much more well fleshed out discussion, because it's, in my mind, I think it's going to be a very self-limiting process. You could have a whole bunch of cultivators out there, but the question is, where's their product going? You know, once the federal law begins to change and things can be shipped off island, maybe, you know, as that happens, that'll be the time to do it. But really, it's the federal law right now with not being able to transport off island. I think there's your rate limiting factor you have to look at. So I just want to bring that up, but it's a much bigger discussion at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Really quick before you go, is this something that the Cannabis Advisory Commission could give us some guidance, recommendations? You guys could dig into some of this, what we're talking about now, limitations and other things that we may not be thinking of?
Absolutely. We're kind of game for everything. Melissa has been awesome to work with. She's your representative to the Cannabis Advisory Committee. We can certainly have another discussion at this point. And if you'd like to, we can even do a board-to-board discussion. But we're happy to work with you in any way, shape, or form. And I think maybe even just having a very simple conversation about bringing you up to speed, what's happened over the course of the past few years, what other uses are out there, and what do we want to do with it? There's a lot of territory here as the cannabis industry continues to grow. So thank you.
Thanks, Barry. It would be helpful for us, because when the first time around, we didn't have the Cannabis Advisory Committee, and it would have been nice to have that set, way in advance in hindsight. So it'll be helpful. Any way you can help us. Thank you, Barry. Any other comments tonight on this? Anybody else in the room? Okay. We're all set there, Libby.
Okay, next we have third quarter budget reports for fiscal 22, General Fund, Our Island Home Enterprise Fund, and Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. Mr. Turbot, our Director of Finance, is going to introduce each item. We are starting with the General Fund, and then we'll get to the Island Home. Peter.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So as the packet notes, the third quarter for the general fund ended very positively. Revenues were $34.2 million, which is about $11 million higher than the prior year. I will note that, as we noted, one of the main drivers of that increase is the fact that due to the timing of certification for fiscal 21, tax bills actually weren't due until the May quarter. So given the fact that we were able to work with the state and get certification for valuation and the tax rate recap set in a more timely manner this year, that certainly is, that's the main driver for what the big tax difference that we see there. Overall, revenues are trending very well. We're at 86% of the year collected. We expect to certainly end up over budget in revenues, given the conservative nature that we've budgeted. Rooms and Meals is performing at a rate that I quite honestly didn't ever think we would see. And I'm still not certain where the stopping point is, quite frankly, to be honest with you, as we look at it. It's rooms taxes at almost $12 million for the first 3 quarters. We have 1 quarter left. Typically it's one of the slower quarters, but I think with some of the events coming back, we may see the June quarter be a little bit higher than anticipated. On the expense side, we're about $3 million under budget. A lot of this is due to vacancies in operations, which for personnel, which does also affect health insurance as well. We're at about 71%, which is right where we would expect to be. The staff is working very closely with all the departments as we get closer to the last 2 months to finalize purchase orders and make sure that any issues that could crop up, we have a good handle on and can deal with in a timely manner. And we have a plan to deal with. Next slide, please, Erica. Thank you. Next one. So this gives you the breakdown by quarter here for the revenue, as noted, the 27 million versus 16 million for property tax. Motor vehicle excise is at 2.3 million. That is generally and mostly made up of the first excise tax commitment that is due in the end of February, beginning of March. Everything else is tracking very close to where we would expect it to on a quarterly basis. Next slide, which is the revenue. This shows the 9 months year to date. As I noted, local rooms tax is at 11.9 million, which is far exceeded anything we thought we would hit on an annual basis. So, which is a very good and positive indicator of what's going on the island. Building permits, we're tracking ahead. So overall on a revenue side, I'm very glad at where we are and think we'll end the year very strong. Revenue expenditure. Next slide, please. Next one. So as noted, a lot of the money that are the difference in a year-over-year basis is really the vacant positions, which not only impacts the salaries on a line-by-line item, but also impacts health insurance as a whole. We are tracking in a positive manner, and I think we'll end the year on an expenditure basis on a very positive note as well. Next slide. Can go past this one, I think. Capital investments, we do try to show you the most of them. Unfortunately, the county assessment's not really capital. It is coded as a capital, so it should be pulled out. Other than that, you can see that we're certainly making progress on a lot of the capital projects. Notably, Nobody Fieldhouse is moving and progressing along. And we spent a fair amount on coastal resiliency planning, as well during this quarter. Next slide. Excuse me, there was no debt issued during this quarter. We're working with Cinder, given the rise in interest rates. We are trying to determine whether we want to do a permanent borrowing before June. We expect that the Fed may raise rates before the end of the year by anywhere between 50 to 75 basis points, which will impact us. So we're trying to figure out when exactly the best time to go to the market is to, obviously we'll be paying a little bit higher rate. We still think that our sell-through will be attractive to all the investors and we'll still get a fairly competitive rate. No change in our bond rating from Moody's at AAA, and Standard & Poor's is actually AA+. We may do a surveillance audit with them, which would be an opportunity for them to hopefully also increase our bond rating to AAA. So we would have AAA from both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Next slide. Investment report is from Morgan Stanley. Overall, we are performing fairly well. They do note in here what the S&P 500 returned at 8.4%. We returned approximately just about 3%. I do note this because we are limited to 21 stocks on the legal list. We don't have full access to the entire market. So when you look at how we're performing with those 21 stocks that we can and purchase, we are performing very well. Next slide is the Muni Watch. The only real concern that we have on the Muni Watch is really building permits over the last 3 months, but they are tracking and trending upwards. So I think that was just a small blip and is not something that we're overly concerned with at this point. I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the general fund.
Any questions for Brian?
No, I'm good.
Good news there.
Thank you. It is very good news.
Thanks, Brian.
So next we've got Our Island Home, and we do have our administrator here, Peter Holden, and on the hybrid part of this, I believe Bob Eisenstein, Our Island Home consultant, is on as well to assist.
Okay, as stated, Bob is on too from Zoom.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a brief overview, and then after that, Bob will take over. Basically, on the third quarter review of this year, fiscal year, compared to last fiscal year, our total revenue for the third quarter was a little over $648,000, which represents a decrease of $248,000 which represents a 28% decrease compared to last year's fiscal. Okay, the decrease in revenue was attributed to a lower census, and thus they will reflect in the lower Medicaid reimbursement for admissions and patient revenue. On the bright side is that we have private patient revenue is up 15% compared to the same quarter last year, which is pretty impressive. On the expense side of the ledger, we have a decrease of $719,000 or 31% compared to the same quarter last year. The main reason for this was the possible retirement expense. This was paid in the third quarter of 2021. In this fiscal year, we paid it in the second quarter. So you can see the difference. Continuing on the expense side, we also had a significant decrease because of unfilled positions of various departments. Our salaries decreased expense was $78,000, which also reflected a $5,000 decrease in medical insurance. Continuing on the increased side of additional expenses, professional services, we had an increase of $21,000, and the food expense was also up $10,000 compared to the third quarter of 2021. Overall, our island home expenses ended the quarter at 61% of the annual budget, considering we have 3 months left. Okay? So Bob, can you continue on, please?
Sure. Hi, good evening, everybody. Jason and Madam Town Manager, board members. I'm going to also just summarize a little bit because some of these numbers, frankly, are a little funky because the census is just down so much compared to last year. But one thing I want to point out on this first slide, we did have a large receipt of funds last year, 2021, due to the CPE, the Certified Public Expenditures. And for those that don't know what that is, that's sort of a reimbursement for the underfunding that we get from Medicaid. Medicaid is notoriously a very poor payer. They don't even reimburse our costs. So there's a $2.8 million amount in this slide that you'll see on the revenue in 2021. That's why it's a little skewed. So if we could actually just go to, I believe the next slide, which just shows this is actually a pretty positive indicator. The red is good. The red is this year's numbers. And if you note from this slide, the better payment sources are actually increased this year versus last. Medicare, private pay, as Peter mentioned, that's a bright light for us because even with a low census, if we can increase the better payers, give you an example, private pay can pay as much as twice as much as Medicaid. So it's one of the best payment sources we can get. Same with Medicare. Medicare can actually be as much as 3 times as much as the Medicaid. So, and the other thing that's interesting on this slide, the Medicaid pendings means we're doing a better job at converting the Medicaids to actual payments. So you see that decrease means we're converting at a better rate this year. The bottom slide just shows the breakdown and a pie chart. And again, the numbers are so small, it's hard to really to make any results from that. But next slide, please. This is where you can see that. So the CPE funds of 2.8 was received in quarter 2 of 2021. So this is a same stores comparison. And this is, the bottom line message for all of us is our census sort of bottoming out in the first quarter of this year. And what happens in nursing homes is we're sort of a delayed response to the COVID epidemic. And this is happening statewide. So because of decrease in hospitalizations, decrease in discharges, our census this year, third quarter, compared to last year, we're averaging 28. Last year, same time, January through March, the average was 35. So that's pretty self-explanatory. The silver lining is that, as I said, the payer sources have held pretty consistent and actually doing better. So believe it or not, this is actually not as bad as what we've seen in some of the other nursing homes. We're sort of holding our own. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Peter, I think the census is starting to pick up already with 6 admissions this quarter alone. So if you look at a calendar year, let's say starting January 1 of this year, hopefully with the census increasing 6 each quarter, that's a very positive sign. Next slide, please. And this is the one where you can see under FY 2021, you see the 2.8. Again, those are certified public expenditure receipts. And what happens there is, I believe it was actually from 2018, 2019. It's based on the cost report. So because we're a government entity, a government-owned facility, we actually can receive federal matching funds to offset the Medicaid losses. So obviously that hit in 2021. If you take that out, I just did a same stores comparison. The actual variance for 9 months just on revenue is 280,000. So if you put that into the total, it's really about a 10% difference. So obviously, don't want to alarm you with that 55%. That's a false number because of that 2.8 that hit last year. Next slide, please. This just shows you it. This is pretty common in the nursing home industry. About 70% of all our expenses are payroll and benefits. We do have a plan to decrease expenses in the professional services area, that 8%. What we're doing is working with Peter to look at all the contracts that we have and trying to consolidate them and do some of this in-house. Take billing, for example. We have a plan to bring the billing system in-house so that we can perhaps reduce some of the contract expenses. The other numbers, unless there's any questions due to the time here, fairly routine costs, nothing really jumps out. And as Peter mentioned, we're actually running at a decrease in overall expenses of 31% for the 9 months, which is pretty hefty. That's actually a higher percentage than the decrease in revenue. So next slide. And this again just looks at the quarter ended total expenditures. You can see there the 31%. I mean, that's actually, again, given the decrease in census, which was sort of beyond our control due to COVID, the facility's done a very good job at keeping level on expenses and actually decreasing. A lot of this had to do with the decrease in travel nursing expenses, which right now I don't believe we have any travelers, so that's been well managed. Next slide. And this gives you the summary for the total 9 month period. Again, I think the long and short of it is the story here is we're really trying to look at the expense side until we can start to increase on census. We do have some positive indicators with the increase in private pay, coming back with the Medicare census, and also increasing our Medicaid conversion rate. So, if we can maximize our reimbursement rate as we incrementally increase census over the next quarter into the summer, into the fall, that will be a very positive sign. And so far indications look like that's the way we're going to go. So it's a glass half full, half empty. It was half, which way does this work now? It was half empty last year. We bottomed out on the census is kind of how I look at this. And that's not unusual for the industry as a whole. And hopefully we're all picking up now. The facility's done a phenomenal job at controlling the COVID outbreak in that facility, better than almost all nursing homes in the state. So as that message gets out, we're hopeful to increase census, maximize our reimbursement, decrease our expenses, and kind of get back on track. We're going to stop there due to time and be happy to entertain any questions between Peter and myself.
Any questions? Matt? Nope. Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
And now we have solid waste, Mr. Turbot.
I know. 2 in one night, right? Thanks, Erica. I didn't pick that picture. So revenue from the third quarter is about $20,000 down. Some of that will be changing as we enter into the fourth quarter. We'll be sending out the landfill bills probably at the end of the month. We also have hired a new position that we're calling the utility billing clerk, which will get that on the landfill bills on a more consistent basis, and we'll really focus on collecting any of the accounts receivable. So we'll see this number in the next couple months really start to ramp up as well. We're at about just under 70% of the estimated budget for the year, pretty close to where we were last year. So while this is always one of those enterprise funds that we really pay a lot of attention to, I do think we'll probably end the year in a fairly good position, not a great position, but we'll come within budget on both sides. Expenditures were certainly up a little bit in the year, or for the first 9 months and the quarter. But all of the analysis and running the numbers through, we certainly do think we'll be able to meet the budget and won't have any issues here. Utilization was up a little bit in some professional services relative to consulting, working on the long-term contract and the planning. But overall, it is performing pretty much where we expect and where we see it on an annual basis at this time.
Just curious for fun, does Munis in that crazy software program, does it have cash flow projections or do you just kind of do it on your own?
It doesn't, but we run them out in a spreadsheet that we've created to do it, and we do an analysis, an annualization based on the collections for the first 9 months, and then run them out, and then we compare that against last year to see if it makes sense and where it is. So.
Be nice if you just push a couple buttons and it would tell you. But
very nice, but I also like being able to input the data and looking at it that way and making sure it makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
any questions for Brian on solid waste? Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Bob and Peter. Next, we have an update on airport water main extension project and the cost of repaving and repairing a private road. So if you will all recall, last November, we came to you because the airport was going to be installing a water main to a certain group of properties that have been impacted by PFAS contamination caused by activities that took place on airport property, very specific number of properties, group of properties. And at the time, we were discussing with the airport the cost to curb pave rather than only pave over the trench, which was what their plan was. We are trying with all projects to ensure that when things are installed in the road, that we do curb to curb paving, not just pave over the trench. At the time, the estimate for that work was approximately $500,000, and you all approved it, subject to further discussion, depending on what the final cost estimate comes in at. So we have an updated cost estimate, which is about $1 million more than what was originally estimated, and that is due to a number of factors. The main one being a much more detailed review of what the costs are to fully pave the road. The airport would continue to pay for the trench area, and we would pay for the difference. There's a little bit of cost worked in possibly for drainage improvements. Typically, our practice would be to not necessarily improve the drainage by adding additional structures, but to clean out catch basins, perhaps reset them if they aren't properly set, things of that nature. Our engineer, and he is on, Ziad Carey, hi Ziad, has recommended that if we're really going to, if this were a public road, we would be installing additional drainage and making some other drainage related improvements. This is not a public road though, and those drainage structures, if we were to actually go ahead and install them, really need to be maintained on a regular basis, and they will not be maintained by the town because they are in a private road. This particular private road does not have a homeowners association associated with it, so if history is any indication, roads without homeowners associations really struggle to maintain themselves. So our request to you tonight is, now that we have a much more final cost estimate, are we willing to spend an additional $1 million instead of that so $1.5 million instead of $500,000 for the curb to curb paving? So our recommendation, I guess, is, as much as we are very reluctant to recommend that significant of an expenditure, we have made something of a commitment to do the curb to curb paving. We do not recommend, though, that the additional drainage be installed. And that, so that's basically our recommendation. And Ziad, I think, is available to answer any questions. Brian, did I miss anything? And Greg and Chuck, I think, are on too. I don't know if they want to add anything.
No.
Oh, yeah, Ziad, oh, sorry, I forgot about the presentation.
Yeah, that's okay. Good evening, everyone. So I just put a quick presentation together just to give a background. Let me see if I could scroll through the screen here. So the area in question on Skyline really runs from the cul-de-sac to Woodland, it's about 2,200 linear feet. And as Libby had mentioned, the contractor has installed the water main and the services. The current condition, as you can see from the photos, the trench is really in terrible shape. There is no base in the roadway. And maybe, coming in a little bit later to the picture, I think what Libby was, the 500,000, and the reason the cost differential is just because the road has no base.
I'm sorry, one sec. We're not seeing the picture that you're seeing, Ziad.
Oh, it's right here on this.
It's Ziad. It's just the cover. It's not going through your slides.
Yeah, it's not going
through the slide.
Yeah.
Maybe just unshare and share again.
Yeah, why don't you unshare and then try sharing again?
Yep.
Thank you.
How about now?
Yep, that's good.
Okay, perfect. So this is just a quick sample of what you have out there. Different views, obviously. The roadway, what was not accounted perhaps in the previous cost estimate is the roadway base, right? So the roadway base, the reason the roadway is falling apart, and you can see the pavement is just basically deteriorating because it doesn't have the gravel that's required to build it. So in a sense here, it's like probably 20 or 22 feet wide by 2,200 linear feet in length. Based on RBO's summary, they installed the water main. They have until like maybe the end of May to the middle of May to finish. They did all the connections. They have 5 services to go perhaps on a final cleanup. So what we looked at 3 different options like we mentioned. The first one was the option 1, we call it, which is full replacement of the roadway and then adding the drainage. And that came into about $1 million sticks. And then certainly we looked into the second option, which is do the curb to curb paving, but building the road the right way, meaning putting a good base of gravel. There is some existing utilities on there, some drainage structures. Perhaps those would be cleaned and then raised to the surface and reinstituted. And then there's some restoration work, which is if you're coming across a driveway where we have cobblestones, you have brick that you have to, by the time you build the roadway, you're going to disturb some of that. So you got to go back and restore that a little bit. And then lumen seed to do the final cleanup. This has an estimate of $1.5 million. Within the estimate, there's a 10% contingency. There's some engineering services associated with it, and then overall restoration. There could be some savings in there, but this is just something to do it right. And then, having the contingency just because of the unknowns. The third option that we looked at, which isn't really the recommended one because the roadway cannot support, if you saw cut the existing trench to pave it, the adjacent pavement is not going to be able to hold up. So that came in about $700,000, right? So that's the option that we're really not recommending. The recommendation would go with option number 2, curb to curb, without having to add additional drainage. And the reason you could add drainage, but because of lack of connectivity, so the drainage isn't really going anywhere. It's you're relying on leaching basins to kind of take on the water and recharge into the ground. So they may be able to take on some of the rain events, but nothing really on magnitude of 10-year storm or 5-year storm for that matter. It's just an instant relief, but it doesn't really address the situation long-term with higher rain events. So with this option, you're looking at a better product because you have full roadway construction. You address the condition of the roadway. And we think that you could, between survey design and construction, you're looking at 2 months. And then again, overall is about 1.5 million with 10% contingency. In terms of a timeline, between April and May, survey and design could be completed. And again, these numbers are based on the Victor Brandon annual contract with the town. So you don't have to bid it. There's no timeline in terms of, you don't have to wait to advertise, bid, and an award. So you could basically give it to Victor Brandon and then have it do it. And we think it could be done by the end of June if everything falls into place.
Thank you, Ziad. Questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. If money were no option, would the drainage be going in? What would you be recommending?
So again, because of lack of connectivity, there's no a conduit that collects the drainage and takes it into a detention pond or maybe some other body of water. The only thing you could do perhaps here, just do some leaching pits and isolated catch basins, interconnect them to a leaching pit and recharge it to the ground.
I was just going to mention that if money were no object, we probably still wouldn't recommend the additional drainage because they will not be maintained going forward by the town. If they were going to be maintained by an established group that came forward and said, we will maintain this, then that would be different.
And the second question, were betterments considered in this situation for this project?
No, because this is not really a roadway improvement project specifically. It was the water main project that the airport put in specifically for properties that have been contaminated by activities that happened on their property. And I don't think betterments would, I'm not even sure they'd be legal in a situation like that.
So kind of a follow-up question with Matt's line of thinking. What would the 160, I know we're not recommending that other option, but what would that extra 160 do? Did you just say that, Ziad? It kind of connects them, but doesn't really fix it?
That would only add 10 structures along the way. It's basically, you pick up some spots along the gutter of the line and you put in the catch basins or perhaps the leaching pits to collect water and kind of recharge into the ground. Just randomly place 10 structures to kind of alleviate some of the issues.
I think that would be very similar to what the town had Victor Brandon do on Orkawa and on Lovers to alleviate those two really bad puddling areas.
So I guess my question is that extra 160, which I know you're not recommending, but will that preserve the work that we're doing? I know it's a private road, but will it preserve it down the road? Is it going to be another problem down the road? Will this fix it a little bit to help preserve what we're doing?
Well, I would look to Ziad to give the engineer's explanation for that, but I think in general, for a short time, but once it's not maintained for a period of time, no.
So what happened was also there's a couple of leaching pits that exist along that segment of the roadway, and the leaching pits is silted up right to the top. So you really can't see anything. I wish I have a picture to show. But the water obviously runs by the structure and then continues to kind of run. I don't think the structures are collecting anything. But we also found out that Robert B. Auer came across a couple structures, and they're fairly new, but they were covered. Maybe those you could pick up. It's not going to cost the town anything more to just bring them up to the surface and then make them part of the final product. That's something maybe you could consider. Long term, again, it's leaching pits and structures are just as good. They're only good to take on, like for instant relief. If you have a rain event where, the water coming down is manageable, so these structures could take on the water, perhaps recharge into the ground. And high rain events, the water is just going to go right by them. So it would help a little bit, but then again, if you don't put any structures, the water's just gonna run and, run over the pavement and find the low spots and then get into, the low-lying areas.
Okay.
These are in this instance, I understand the reasoning, but when we've had these discussions about this whole area in the past, my take on it is the town should be taking these roads, but only if they're up to snuff. Because what happens is they're developed, ages ago or recent, and they're not taken care of, and then it becomes, it's sort of us subsidizing the first go round or the second go round of it, and then it becomes a taxpayer expense. I think that there should be betterments. I say this every time, and that it should be coming to the town in good order. It's the properties are assessed based on what was put in or not put in each individual situation. And so I just think from a fairness aspect, I think that we should be trying to have this done. It's cheaper for private individuals to do it when they get organized and do it. And I think it's better for the rest of the island who has to end up footing the bill. So, but anyway, I just think as a policy, we should be thinking about that. We don't have enough dollars. We have so many needs that when we start taking, when we start thinking that, we can just do this and that because it's a bad area, it ends up, we can't. And so anyway, that's.
I totally agree with you, Matt. And a couple of things on that. The funds will be coming from the American Rescue Plan Act. So they aren't technically from taxpayers. I guess you could say they really are from taxpayers, but not from Nantucket paying, not from our property tax. That's one thing. For another thing, this is a little bit of a different situation than the normal bad private road that people want to have repaired. The residents didn't really ask for this. It was an initiative by the airport, rightly so, to deal with a problem they had on their property, which contaminated people's wells. There are other roads in this general area, the so-called Surfside area roads, that have already been taken by the town, and now they are in poor condition, and now they do need to be brought up to, they need to be reconstructed pretty much entirely. So that is underway. However, there were discussions early on, prior to the takings, about the repairs, and the board at the time determined, after a lot of discussion, not to pursue the betterments. I think it's definitely a discussion worth having, though, whenever something like this comes up. We have a couple of roads in our queue that are in poor condition that people have approached the town to undertake repairs, subject to betterments. I think they are generally willing to pay the betterments, but there is an upfront cost that the town would have to put forward and then recoup it through the betterments, and there is a specific process for that. So anyway, I think we definitely want to look into the betterments whenever possible.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts?
No, and I support it this time, but I bring that up. I was on the losing end of the betterment situation, and as you can see, this road doesn't have a base. So no wonder it isn't working. It wasn't built properly to begin with. And so, so I just think that's, you look at fairness, why should we be paying for something that wasn't done right to begin with? And so, I think people, it's not a popular position, and if we start talking about it, everyone will show up and say, "Don't charge me," and I get a lot of dirty looks. But I'm trying to think of what is right for the total of the island, and how many can we get more. If we do it that way, we'll get more projects done, and things will be built properly to begin with, as opposed to sort of hoping that someone else will take care of it later. So anyway, but I support this tonight. I'm just sort of on my soapbox about this because I have a chance.
Are we ready to vote for a certain option?
Make a motion to go with the recommendation of 1.5 million.
Option
Option
right?
two.
Okay. All need more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ziad.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ziad.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Next, we have an update on requests for proposals for a shooting range facility at portion of 1 Shadbush Road. So prior to, pursuant to prior board action, we issued a request for proposals for a shooting range at the subject property, a portion of 1 Shadbush Road, which is contingent upon a vote of the 2022 annual town meeting. It's Article 101, which would authorize the board to enter into a long-term lease with the successful proposer. We have received one proposal. It's in the process of being evaluated per procurement requirements. I myself have not completely read it. Matt, I think you were in today looking at it. So we have it available. It is public. A member of the press asked to take a look at it, so we let him borrow it. It's kind of big. We haven't got, have we gotten it online yet? We may not have. It's just a little tough to happen.
I think it is actually online, but I'll
okay.
double check to make sure.
But
And if we'll know.
we will get it online.
Yes.
So the next steps would be that we see how the town meeting vote goes, and if it is approved, then we'll get together the required evaluation group to review the proposal and bring that back to the board, and then you all would vote on whether or not to execute a long-term lease.
In a town meeting, if they do not pass it,
Then I think other discussions would probably happen.
Yeah, Jason, the town meeting is giving us the ability to, if I understand it correctly, to negotiate the lease. So if there's things in there we want to add or subtract when we negotiate, we can still have that option.
There is some leeway with the lease.
Yes.
Brian. And there are other aspects to the warrant article. It's not just a long-term lease authorization. There is a conservation restriction that as part of this particular project would be required to be put on the property. The shooting range facility itself, I believe, is approximately 9-ish acres. The conservation restriction, I believe, would cover approximately 18-ish acres. And that would be a permanent restriction to the property. So if we, for whatever reason, voted or the shooting range didn't proceed, then the conservation restriction would not be placed on there until we determine what sort of use would happen with the property. Anyway, this was just meant to be an update.
okay, thank you.
All right, town management report. I, don't usually take you through every little part of this. So just to point out a few things, various plans, reports, and studies that are underway. Obviously, the coastal resiliency plan remains active, and we're working on the so-called visibility projects that were identified with the design thinking workshop back in early March. And those are Nantucket Road and Ames Avenue dune nourishment, Easy Street flooding valves, that actually I believe is complete. And in initial planning, this hasn't quite started yet, but it is definitely in discussion for Washington Street, Francis Street, planning for phase 2, that would be elevating the roadway. And we are working with the land bank on that. They have very graciously offered to fund a design review of that area. And elevation of the road area at Sacajapon and Pulpus Road. We're looking at a climate action plan, which at some point, sooner rather than later, we are going to need. Strategic plan, always working on that. And you all had a solid waste long-term planning workshop earlier this week. We'll be working on the next one later this week. And state of the town update, that we're going to get to that next. Nantucket water quality improvement plan. You had some discussion on this back in February, and we are actually still in the process of evaluating options. We have talked a bit to Weston and Sampson about moving away from the Nantucket sewer idea because of the coastal resiliency issues that are causing a large cost issue and some complications with that project. So we're looking at other areas that may be possibly in more need of being sewered, such as the Somerset Needs area, Helmut Pond, that area. Facilities master plan, that just is always being worked on. Baxter Road long-term planning, I think you all know that is well underway. We have regular internal meetings scheduled to review progress there. PFAS, always ongoing. Various meetings, lots of focus this week and last week on town meeting preparation and outreach. We've got the videos posted that I mentioned, the voters guide, outreach meetings with various community groups. KPI Managers has a monthly meeting. I've got this summer issues team, and we're sort of started out initially as a COVID response team. Now it's morphed into a summer issues team. We talk about events, we talk about business stuff, and a bunch of different things. It's very interesting, actually. Let's see here. I'm trying not to read every little thing. Lots of projects going on. You had the annual water quality update 2 weeks ago. The No Deer Fieldhouse construction is underway. Some other projects are getting going or are underway already. We have a lot going on with personnel, staffing and personnel management related. Our classification and compensation study project is underway. We're looking at succession planning and retention strategies. HR is actively working on an improved staff onboarding and training program. And we're getting into sort of a school to career development program, as well as I think you all know, our housing, town employee housing assistance pilot program, which the Finance Committee agreed today to put forward a technical amendment to Article 8 that would authorize $1 million to go into this pilot program. It does have yet to be fully vetted and developed, and no funds would be spent without the approval of the Select Board and the Finance Committee, and they were agreeable with that. Continuing to prioritize DPW projects. And personnel wise, oh yes, lots going on with the right now, this week and last week, the Parks Master Plan revisions in consultation with Weston and Sampson, who is our professional consultant for that project. They were here last week looking at the Tom Nevers area, the Novadear and Delta fields, the DPW facility evaluation at the Delta property, and the concessions review. And I've got a meeting, I think, coming up next week to get an update about what all that led to. Personnel, I think you all know that we hired a deputy DPW director for operations, the assistant town manager for administration, who is here, Rick Sears. I don't think I introduced him last week. I probably forgot to do that, but there he is right over there. Fire chief is retiring in September, and we are starting recruitment for that position. The collector is retiring in June, and we have started recruiting for that. The culture and tourism director recruitment is underway and coming to a close very shortly. And those were just, there's lots more positions besides that, but those were some main ones. And that's the highlights. Questions?
No, my only thought for housing is that third floor of 16 Broad Street. If we could clear that out, we could put 2 apartments up there. I'm just saying it. Out there.
That we need a tiny bit more, because in the summer it's about 150 degrees up there.
We get central air in there.
The winter
That's fine.
it's like
a couple
2.
air conditioners.
Yeah, it'd be fine. We could probably, yeah. Okay.
I can attest, it's hot. I've climbed around and looked for things up there.
It's me too, and I now refuse to go up there in July and August. Okay, if no questions on that, the state of the town report. While Erica is getting it pulled up, I just wanted to give a little bit of an introduction. Last fall and winter, it was evident to us that the summer of 2022 was going to be very challenging. And, and we've been just talking about some of this: supply chain slowdowns, labor shortages, housing and employee recruitment and retention difficulties, the likelihood of more visitors than ever. We saw a huge weekend last weekend. So internally, we began discussing ways to address these issues, and also what would our messaging be to the community as to services that could be town services that could be impacted. We're not immune to similar pressures facing businesses and towns all over the place. So we want to really try to get that message across, because there are going to be some service impacts. Town staff has always worked especially hard during the summer to provide high level of services, and obviously we want to keep that going, but we are going to be facing labor shortages. So our video is intended to provide a broad overview of the state of the town, including our strengths, where we're going to need patience and understanding, and initiatives that we're trying to put in place to address the identified issues. And I wanted to just dedicate the video to an individual, to Bill Sherman, who is a longtime Civic League member. He's been a longtime town board volunteer, and decades ago, he recognized the need to have town government be modernized and centralized, which it wasn't at the time. He was instrumental, along with many others, in working to develop a town charter. And he's been a supporter of town administration. And from day one, he has been encouraging a state of the town message. Every year he would say, Libby, have you done that state of the town message yet? So here you go, Bill.
How long did it take?
It,
Couple years.
just a couple years.
Just a couple. That's good.
Yes, ready. We are entering a busy time in the life of our town. Town meetings, local elections, budget season, seasonal prep and planning, and of course the season when everyone comes to share in the unique beauty of our island, summer. To say the last 2 years have been difficult for all of us would be an understatement. The reality for the town is that much has changed. Like many of you, the pandemic has taken a toll on town staff, and as we begin this crescendo towards summer and ahead of our town meeting, I want to share with you the state of the town in hopes that we can set expectations for the near future, and frankly, ask you to have a little patience and understanding with the realities that your town government is facing. Of course, it's not all bad, so let's start with our strengths. First, the town's finances. We are in outstanding fiscal condition. Our AAA bond rating ensures when we do borrow, we do so at the most competitive rates. Our reserves are more than double the minimum threshold outlined in the town's financial policies. Our budget is balanced each year, and we are focused on maintaining our strong fiscal condition. Our comprehensive annual financial report can be viewed online for all details. While the pandemic was tough for our community, the reality is we made it through, together, in better condition than many other places. We focused on public health, supporting local businesses and nonprofits. The town expanded its commitment to ensuring a welcoming and inclusive community with the establishment of our own Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, and we shifted to virtual and hybrid meetings, which allowed for increased public participation in town government. None of what we do every day can be done without the dedicated employees of the town. Our staff are your friends and neighbors, and we are fully committed to doing our best for our community. Nantucket's physical environment is beautiful and open to all. Its attributes attract and benefit visitors and residents. While beautiful, the physical environment is also a challenging reality, exacerbated by the impacts of climate change on our island. Sea level rise and coastal resiliency are realized in the serious impact of erosion and flooding on and near the shore, with homes, roads, and other infrastructure in jeopardy. We depend on our water, drinking, and ocean for our lives and livelihoods. The quality of our water sources requires dedicated attention to the cleanliness of the harbors, ponds, and the safety of the aquifer. The effective management of nitrogen and other pollutants in stormwater runoff and emerging concerns regarding the impact of PFAS pose significant challenges. While our strengths position us to face our reality, the truth is, Nantucket is like no other place. The scope of town operations is more expansive than most towns our size, even twice our size. We do it all. Compare us to other towns, but the comparisons usually fall short of what Nantucket does. This organizational chart of Scituate, Massachusetts shows the typical list of municipal operations in mainland settings. On Nantucket, we offer everything that Scituate offers, as well as the only municipal nursing home in the state, the second busiest Massachusetts airport in the summer season, a solid waste facility,
Erica, what'd you do?
I didn't do anything. I'm watching right along with you.
This is the best part. This is my favorite part of the whole thing. Yeah, just thinking.
I'm blaming you too.
We think about going backwards like 30 seconds and to see if it.
This is so hard to see. They had the Zoom bars blocking. You just have to move.
State, the second busiest Massachusetts airport in the summer season, a solid waste facility, 2 wastewater treatment facilities, a water department, a K-12 school district, a municipal housing office, and we need to increase our summer staffing across several departments to provide necessary services to support the summer population surge. And our access to mutual aid is limited because of our island location. While certainly consistent with similar challenges faced by local governments around the country, finding the staffing we need to provide services is increasingly difficult. More positions are vacant for longer periods of time, especially in critical departments such as DPW, Public Safety, Our Island Home, and Planning. We currently have more than 40 vacancies. Finding seasonal staff and housing to put them in is particularly hard post-pandemic. Another critical reality we face is staff retention. Pay rates and benefits are typically lower in the public sector than the private sector. This is exacerbated by the higher cost of living here. Of course, again, one of the most difficult realities is the challenge of finding appropriate housing. Nantucket is also growing. The 2020 census showed year-round residents numbering 14,255, up from 10,172 in 2010. More people are moving here, requiring more of the services that we and other organizations already struggle to provide. Just as there is an increased demand for municipal services, response rates to service requests are slowing due to the lack of staff and even outside services available to provide prompter service, as well as an increase in the number and scope of requests. We see it in trash bins overflowing, streetlights needing repair, limits in the size and number of fundraising events requiring town resources, and the execution and maintenance of large projects. We have multiple major capital projects on the horizon. All of them are high cost and management intensive. With the supply chain slowdown, labor shortages, and inflation, these projects will be even more challenging. Understandably, the community wants Nantucket to be at best practice levels in all areas, while at the same time, we see service demands continuing to increase. Sustainability, resiliency, housing, DEI are important community and board priorities. We have added positions in recent years to address these priorities. It is a challenge to figure out how we can possibly meet these new and growing demands in the context of the current staffing environment. There are priorities that guide town decision-making and asset allocation. The Select Board Strategic Plan has 5 areas of focus: housing, transportation, environmental leadership, efficient town operations, and quality of life. While staff continues to make progress on addressing these areas of focus with associated goals, we remain challenged by resource needs, competing interests, and new initiatives. To summarize the key messages for the state of the town, Nantucket's town government is a small town operation with small town resources and with large town needs. Our staffing and housing patterns have not kept pace to meet the continuing growth and demand for additional and expanded services and operations. We all have limited patience these days. Things are unsettled and stressful worldwide. Town employees are doing their best within the constraints they have, and we don't have the resources to meet all expectations. Please be patient and kind. Each of us has a responsibility to keep our island a special place. We can all perform simple and basic stewardship: pick up loose trash, pick up after your dog, recycle properly, walk your bikes in town, drive carefully, offer a kind word of thanks, be considerate. We appreciate understanding and support as we navigate these changing and challenging times. Let's work this together. And remember, if you want a village, it takes a village.
Well done. Good job.
Thank you.
Did Florencia put a lot of that together?
Yes, I wanted to acknowledge our public outreach coordinator, Florencia Rulo. She produced this video. And we had a lot of input from the cabinet and the assistant town managers and Janet Schulte, our culture and tourism director, and some others that we showed it to. So we really, really appreciate the input that went into it. If you all are okay with it, we would share this in social media, have it on the website. I don't know if we can put it on the boats or anything like that, but just a real effort to get it out so that people see where we're coming from for the summer.
You can always ask the boats to.
We can always ask.
That's what I was thinking. I'd ask them. It's not.
And the airport.
And the airport, yep. Yeah, I think the airport's it.
I think it's fabulous. And my only feedback to Libby was I wish the picking up after your dog's waste was actually showing people throwing it in the garbage. instead of just picking it up, because it's a two-step process. We have to pick it up and then we have to throw it away.
Yes, I thought about your comment on that because I kept thinking to myself, those people that were riding their bikes should be walking the bikes. But what we were trying to show is what they were doing isn't what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
I mean, we definitely want you to pick up your dog waste and throw it in the trash.
Yeah. It's a great video. Thank you to everyone for doing that.
I think it's hard in 6 minutes to explain Nantucket.
Yeah,
right?
it had to be cut down a couple of times.
Mhm.
It was originally about 10 minutes, and people felt that was much too long to hear me going on and on about stuff. So we cut it down.
Yeah, I think the line is, well, I think it's small town operations, small town resources with large town. What was the last part? Challenges.
Small town resources, small town with large town issues. I forget what it was. Yeah, it was something like that.
I've always
Needs,
said,
yes.
City level
Yeah,
complexity with
Yeah.
small town resources and government. Done. Any other comments there?
Looking forward to next year's.
I know you've set the bar kind of high.
It's hard to read stuff like that because you have to go slow, but not too slow. No audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Libby, and everybody who worked on that. Well done. Any comments? Select board reports, comments? Okay. Well, before we go, I just want to thank Christy again.
Sorry, can I mention what I totally forgot to mention this at the beginning, I think. There is no board meeting next week.
Yeah.
As a town meeting.
Right.
So Coastal Resiliency met. They're happy to be supported and be back. So.
Anything else?
No, you can thank Christy now.
Trying to thank you, Christy. No
Thank
one
you.
said anything in the beginning. I want to thank you for your leadership. I enjoyed working with you the whole time, even vice chairs last year, and I thought you really brought your leadership really came out in COVID, right? When you were with the chamber and after you left, and really trying to collaborate and work with other people and problem solve when nobody knew what to do, right? You showed a lot of leadership there. Also with DEI, and I think you brought you listened and spoke up for people who didn't have a voice as well, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you to the community for letting me serve for the past 3 years. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm not going far, so I'm sure you'll hear from me.
Good. Stay close.
All right, would you like to make the last motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Oh, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.